Welcome to the Bayou City Soccer Podcast. Whether inside or outside the loop, we are talking everything soccer in Houston. Y'all ready? Let's get it.
Welcome to a special episode of the Bayou City Soccer Podcast. We're pleased to be joined today by Kacey White from Apple TV. Kacey, how's it going?
It's going well. Good to be here.
You will be in Houston this weekend at Shell Energy Stadium for the game, Houston Dynamo against Portland Timbers. If you're not going to be out there, you can catch it on Apple TV along with all of the Dynamo's matches. Dynamo had a week off, now coming back after 2 home games, a third home game for them. A little bit of a new system we've seen from this Dynamo team. What have you seen looking at this team as you guys prepare for the match?
Well, I like the 3-4-2-1 system a lot, to be quite honest with you. And head coach Ben Olsen was really honest with us that, it had to make some changes based on player profiles and different things they saw throughout preseason. And it will take time to continue to run like a well-oiled machine. But I like a wingback system, especially when you have 3 kind of prototypical center backs that are really good defensively, keep them at home, and it can really generate your attack in the wide spaces. So I've enjoyed seeing that. And we've seen 2 different types of performances within that system as well versus Chicago and an LAFC.
Yeah, that LAFC game, they went down to 10 men, right at the end of the half. They went down to 9, so it kind of threw things off. But I think a lot of big questions still are their wingbacks, right? Griffin Dorsey traded right before the season. Lawrence Anali, not really a wingback. It looks like they're potentially bringing Ibrahim Aliou back from Columbus, maybe signing another wingback. What have you seen from those wingbacks and the way that Olsen wants to play them?
One of the things that we saw, we were on the call for the first game versus Chicago in Houston, especially with Lawrence Anali, was just the understanding of he can still get forward at times, because you could almost tell that he wanted to make sure he got his defensive responsibilities right, which so often happens with a player that's used to being a bit higher up the field. I was a 10 and I was also a winger. I was asked to play outside back in a 3 system before, a 4 system with the national teams. It takes a little while to figure out where not to overcompensate and how to read the cues of the game. So I think that was one thing we saw from him in that first game, from Dwayne Holmes on the opposite side, just figuring out how to play in conjunction with other players and the unit pieces of not having as much time together with the late departure of Griffin Dorsey. LAFC was completely different, because the reality is that the responsibility was defensive structure for those wingbacks. I think we're going to see something a little different in this game versus the Portland Timbers. While defensive structure will be important, I expect them to play a bigger role going forward.
Yeah, and offensively for Houston, we saw the 2 goals from Guilherme in the first game. But, putting all these new pieces together, they have 3 DPs up front, Guilherme, Mati Bogusz, Ezekiel Ponce, along with Jack McGlynn, who looks to be playing deeper this year. What have you seen from the Houston attack, and how good do you think they could be once they kind of get it all figured out?
I think it could go in a really positive direction and could trend that way. Getting Guilherme his first goals, I think, were critical, not only because he can be that contributor, but a lot of times players that are those attacking players, whether they're a 9 or a 10 on the wing, they base so much of their performance on whether it goes into the back of the net, even if they do all of these other great things within the run of play. So the sooner that a Ponce can get a goal, Bogusz can get a goal, I think it will be better, because that kind of gets off your back and then you can start really clicking. Jack McGlynn not being higher up the field, you gain some and you lose some from it, but it's what the team needs right now in this moment. That could change throughout the year, but I think that him on the ball is always a good thing, no matter where on the field he is. And his role this weekend with the red card situation is going to be even more critical to allow the players above him to attack.
Yeah, and you talked about playing as a 10 too, and McGlynn kind of played as that 10 last year on the right, that Coco Carrasquilla role we saw. Now playing deeper, it looks like we've seen him coming back to, the Dynamo box to get balls, get on the ball. What is that mentality like for a player like McGlynn, where he's playing a lot deeper, but also maybe more involved because he is on the ball more?
One thing I will point out is any 10 just wants the ball. I don't care if they're on their own inline from a goal kick getting it, or they're up around the 18. Yes, we would prefer the attack. I loved attacking more than defending. But more than that, I just wanted to be the playmaker. I wanted to be on the ball as a 10. And I think most 10s would agree with me. So I think for Jack McGlynn, while it may not be his preferred position or his most natural position, he just wants to get on it. And we saw against LAFC that because there was such a defensive posture that had to be taken even before the red card because of the attack of LAFC, he started to drop between the center backs. He started to rotate out wide and get on the ball. I think we'll see more of that, but with this matchup, I think for Jack McGlenn, mentality-wise, he's going to hope that's a little higher up the field in that middle third or in the final third.
Yeah, and you mentioned the red cards. Augustin Buzat is out. Artur is out with an injury. Two of the Dynamo's, defensive-minded center midfielders, which you mentioned, puts a lot on McGlenn. Where do you see them do you see them maybe changing things up a little bit, maybe being more defensively in that midfield and with McGlenn in them, or how do you maybe see them playing differently without Buzat, who's a key piece?
I don't think we'll see a change in system necessarily. I do think Jack McGlenn's going to ask to be even deeper. Buzat is usually the deeper one, especially if it's in an emergency situation and he's more of that ball-winning type. Jack McGlenn as a leader, even as young as he is, and comfortability on the ball, I think will play that role. What's going to be interesting is it's two players right down the spine of the team. So do you bring in Aresh that came in who hardly has any play? Do you shift either Sviatchenko or Alter into that center of the center backs? I mean, there's so much you can do with this. I think by committee in the midfield, it's going to be interesting whether you bring in Ache for part of the game and then you bring in another player, maybe bring Linger back into a 10. There's so many different pieces. I'm interested to see what Ben Olsen does here, whether it's just two straight swaps or he starts to move things around.
Yeah, I think we've talked about that a lot this week. Do they go back to a back four? Do they go back to, the 4-2-3-1? A lot of interesting things. But looking at the other side of the ball, Portland, maybe not the best team for the Dynamo to be defensively having questions about, guys like Felipe Mora, Anthony, a lot of good attacking options up with the Timbers. What can you tell us about that Portland attack?
Well, then you get Isiota, 18-year-old scoring.
Yeah, scoring on his debut.
Goals of the weekend. So that's
crazy.
So he's probably feeling it a little bit. And then you have Velde, who is all around it, but hasn't scored. So I think there's going to be a lot of hunger from both attacks. One for Houston with a weekend off and coming off a loss where they went down two players and didn't get a lot of attack. Then from the Portland Timbers, there are so many options. I have a hard time knowing sometimes where Phil Neville's going to go with his attack because no one is just scoring a lot of goals, but there's a lot of options from attacking threat standpoint. But I think one thing they do well is that a counter-attacking transition. And when they get the ball, they go quickly and create chances.
Yeah, and looking at their midfield, I know Cole Bassett, Diego Chara were out. Isiota got his chance. How key is it for those guys, those veterans, for them? Bassett's a little younger, but Chara seems like he's been around forever. But having those guys in the midfield for a team like Portland that's still kind of maybe figuring things out, like this Dynamo team really, and seeing how good they can be.
There's two pieces to the veteran presence, especially like a Chara you mentioned, that you're only 3 games into the season. For young players, it can be so easy to go, oh, we're on a 2-game skid and things are falling apart. And it's such a long season. And while you need to take every game seriously, it's more than that. It's not just always about one game. People talk about, oh, it's just the next game. Yes, on the front side, but on the back side, some of those veteran leaders can help have a bigger vision for players as they go throughout a season. I also think in the run of play, understanding emotional management of different times in the game. You're going on the road to a Houston Dynamo team who I think is pretty confident and feels hard done by in the last game. So there's going to be moments in this game where the Timbers are going to have to manage the crowd, manage the home environment, whatever it may be. And that's where a veteran leader comes in.
Yeah, and just looking at Portland defensively, I know we've been looking at them this week. 8 goals they've conceded in their first 3 games, the most in the Western Conference. What have you seen defensively where they've maybe struggled and how they can maybe improve on that?
One of the things that they have to think about, especially going on the road, is how can they be stingier defensively, to your point. They cannot always be in this expansive shape that allows all these goals to happen. Now, 4 of those came in one game versus Vancouver and some really nice finishes. But just when we see nice finishes, coaches will always tell you there were 3 or 4 times they could have stopped the play, most likely from an individual standpoint, for getting there. So I'm assuming there'll be an individual focus from each of the players on how can we defend and be stingier. And like I said, being on the road, I don't think they're going to want an open game. So I would expect a really tight defensive structure and looking more for that counter-attacking transition.
Yeah, and looking back now at the Dynamo, a lot of talk this season about so many changes, so many new players, and re kind of redoing things after they missed the playoffs under Ben Olsen for the first time. A lot of talk about what this team can be, from outside people. Just from your perspective, how good do you think this Dynamo team could be? I know a lot of people saying they could maybe compete for the playoffs, maybe even compete. And we've talked to their players; they want to compete for a home playoff game. But a lot of new pieces get gelling together. How fast do you think that can happen, and how good do you think they could be in 2026?
There are so many factors, but one of the things that I look at is, do you have special players on your roster? Because special players can win you games. You can play terrible and someone pulls something out of nowhere, you get a 1-0 win and you get out of there. And so, does this team have special goal scorers? I believe they do. And I think that's one piece to really take a look at. The other piece is there adaptability from a system and a defensive standpoint where you make it incredibly hard on teams? I think we saw for 45 minutes that the Houston Dynamo can do that against one of the best teams in the MLS. Until that red card, it was very defensively structured. It was very patient. They limited chances. Did LAFC still look like they could score at times? 100%. But from a coach's standpoint, and that's kind of my mindset, is you have to know who you're playing and you have to know when to say, this is how we have to set up to give our team the best opportunity to win. And I think Ben Olsen did that in that game. Unfortunately for the Dynamo, second half had other things in store, but it was still just 2 set-piece goals. I think that bodes well for the future of the Houston Dynamo, and I think we're going to see some positive things here.
She's Kacey White. You can catch her on Apple TV. Kacey, before we let you go, I know we were talking to some of the Timbers broadcasters and Dynamo people, and it's like, okay, this is a game that we need 3 points in, right? Both teams feel like this is a game we can win, we should win. Just overall, what do you expect to see from this matchup between two teams that seem to be pretty evenly matched?
I think we're going to see an aggressive start from Houston Dynamo being home, pressing off the front foot. I would normally say that from Portland, but I think going on the road and conceding how many goals they've had, I could see a more conservative approach. But I haven't spoken to Phil Neville this week, so who the heck knows? He might throw me for a loop. Don't do that, Phil. Makes me not look as smart. But I do think we're going to see the aggressor being the Houston Dynamo. And overall in form, I believe the Dynamo's in better form, but Portland has some dangerous players that I think are chomping at the bit to get those first goals.
She's Kacey White. You can catch her on the broadcast this weekend. Houston Dynamo, Portland Timbers at Shell Energy Stadium, Apple TV. Make sure you check it out. Kacey, we really appreciate the time, and we'll see you again out at the stadium and talk to you again real soon.
Sounds good. Thanks for having me.
Houston, Houston.